Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Miss Fay Simon, who wrote Behind the Mirror. This is a definite read. It's amazing. Fay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited. You're so
Oh,
beautiful.
thank you. You are too. And your book is amazing. I have to be honest, this is one of the best books I've read in several years. It is so fast reading. And I read a lot of great books, but
hmm
the way that you put it together was amazing. So can you give us a little bit of information about the book, how you came up with the idea?
Well, first of all, I'm a big fan of The Phantom of the Opera, the original novel. And after reading that, it just got me into a mood where I said, well, what if I made something kind of on that order, but not? And that's where I got my inspiration from Gaston Leroux. And then I thought, what about romance? Sweet, beautiful romance. I mean, there's so much of other things in the world, which I won't go into, but I want something where a woman falls in love with a man and he falls in love with her and they get married and they have this beautiful relationship. But of course, they all have little trials and tribulations that they have to go through. Maybe they don't, normal people don't go through the excitement that there is in the book, but that's what I thought. It made the husband and wife bond together. It made them stronger, and it also gave them some sort of a religious conviction. Regardless of whether you're religious or not, at least something will bind you and give you some kind of hope, something to grasp for. Maybe it's not a real light, but it's something that you really can grasp for and can use in your own life. And hopefully you find that perfect love.
It is an amazing love story, but it's also, it borders on sci-fi, time travel, alchemists, there's magic, there's all these different elements, and amazingly, it all works together. It's such a beautifully woven story. How did you create and combine all of these elements?
Well, I love sci-fi. And I also love anything paranormal, supernatural, magic. I and of course there's a lot of it's a fine line. I mean, are you if you are actually creating something or doing an experiment, is it actually science? Or is it magic? There's a fine line between because an alchemist is actually using, an experiment or chemicals and so forth to create some magical thing. That's where I figured, why not put them together? And if it's time travel, there's so many theories about it. And for example, what's in the book? If you've misplaced your keys, is it really misplaced? And then later on, you find it's where you know you didn't put those keys. And in fact, recently I had that problem. I missed my keys for like, I don't, months. And then I find them in the new purse that I have never put those keys. So is that a dimensional shift?
Oh, that
What happened? See, because when the dimensions shift, then that means something is, as we put it, misplaced, but it isn't. It's just put someplace else in another dimension to go into another time, maybe in your own time, but it's shifted. So that's where I figured, let's put that into the book and say they shifted into the time. Going through the mirror opened a portal. And there's so many theories about mirrors because they have worked with mirrors where you have two of them together and that opens up a portal and then you can go through it. and say, how do you get back? Well, then that's where the adventure comes. Then there's my imagination, is some of it's real science that I had, researched on. Some of it is just my love of, let's see if I can imagine something more and add that to it. And that's how I got the dimensional information. And then there's the magic part. I mean, there's so many stories about magic, incantations and potions and that, but it's so exciting. I mean, how many stories do we get? Like even on TV, we had Charmed, and we have, so many little stories that are coming out. I mean, they're a big time. Everybody wants to be taken away to a beautiful place, or maybe not beautiful, maybe something that's just exciting and you can just poof, something's there, or let's see if we can get an incantation to get it to go away, or we're going into a land. You don't always want that everyday stuff that you hear on the news, or you can look outside your back door and see that. You want to be carried away to another land, another place where you can imagine something different, imagine different scenery. Maybe it is something chasing you, but isn't that exciting? Because at some point you're hopefully that you'll get away from it. It's not like, oh, I owe more bills. Am I going to get away from that? Well, maybe that monster in that story is the bills coming after you, but it gets more exciting than that. That's where I got in with the magic. So if you know how to do it, you can weave all of those things together: the science, the magic, the scary, evil demon in there, and who knows? They call it, I called it the in-between. Some people call it purgatory. Some Doctor Who calls it the timey-wimey void, or whatever he says. But whatever it is, how do we know that there isn't something in between dimensions?
Uh,
Something where you could just fall through at some point,
oh, I know. What would you say is the most direct message you meant to send when you wrote the book? Because it's such an amazing read. I couldn't put it down. I was up until 1:30 in the morning reading it. And it was such a great break from my everyday life. It really just took me away. There was no wasted time with details that I didn't need. It was so realistic at the beginning, and I honestly was just transported.
Oh, that makes me feel good, because what I see is what I write. I could see every bit of the description, the murals on the ceiling, or the ornate statuettes, or the in between, the graying world, or the beautiful world. I see all of those things, and I figured that if I wanted to be transported away from everyday reality just for a little bit, then I figured I could transport the reader and have them share my excitement with that, because I was excited to write it. I really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that not only you, but others that read it will feel my excitement with it, because that's what I want it to be, transported to another world for a little time and see that excitement. And the message is basically, there isn't anything that you can't overcome, especially if you and your whoever your love interest is, or maybe it isn't a love interest, maybe it's family, a close friend, but you can accomplish whatever it is that you want. Even if you get stuck in another dimension, you can always come home.
That is fantastic. I totally got that message too. So, what inspired you to write? Is this something that you learned in school? And can you tell us a little bit about your career? Because it's multifaceted and it shows where you got the imagination to write this book.
I started in grade school. I've always loved to write. Watching television, reading books, I would transport myself mentally, and I'm saying, oh, I can see this story and that story. So I started writing. And of course, we had little writing assignments, but every time they would have a little competition, they'd start out a story. I don't care what the story is. If you started out and say, okay, end it. That was exciting for me. You gave me an idea, so I'll go ahead and end it. And every one of those little competitions that were in grade school, I won them.
That's
They said, don't put your name on it yet. Just, you'll hand it in, we'll read them off, and we'll vote. And it was always my endings. And I thought, oh, this is exciting. People like my writing. Here I am, fifth grade, fourth grade. Oh, you like my writing. So I continued on. Then when I got into middle school, I was still writing. And my girlfriend that would sit next to me, she'd go, are you writing again? And I said, yeah. She says, well, I got to see it. And I'm not bragging, but I could listen to a lecture and still write my stories. And they were coming into my head. And they're always adventurous like the ones that you've read, but they were short ones. And she'd always say, I got to read these. I got to read these. So that was exciting. I had somebody who liked to read what I've written. And my mother was always very supportive. God rest her soul. She's passed now, but she was always supportive. And I guess some of that writing rubbed off on me from her because she loved poetry. And so she was a big poetry writer. But for me, it was stories, novels. So then from in middle school, I also was one of the editors on the, what do you call it, one of the magazines that they had. They called it the Troubadour. And it was a literary magazine with stories and poetry and what have you, sayings that people have made up. So that was exciting to me. And I said, oh, I want to go on and I want to do more. So high school really got me on a high. I wrote a story about a cursed diamond. I kind of got the idea from that Hope diamond that years ago people said was cursed. But I took my own spin on it and everything. And the teacher, I was, I think, a sophomore or junior, and she said, just like you, she said, this is the best story I've ever read in a long time. She says, and I'm so picky. And she says, and she had to tell every class that she had. And of course, you know how kids are. They're all looking at me like, oh, you wrote this. And she said, it was so good. She said the same thing. She said, it sucked me in. I couldn't put it down. She says, most of the time I'll look at a few pages, I don't want to read. But she said, with yours, I read all of it. She gave me an A+. Yeah, there was
oh,
some grammatical errors.
I definitely give you an A+. This is
Thank you.
amazing. Amazing writing, amazing storytelling. And the cover art is great. And you did a trailer for it as well.
Yes, I
So
did.
that's part of the promotional process that people are doing with books now. And did you do it yourself or did you have someone help you?
I had Don Reamer from Airworthy Productions to help me put that together, and he was such a sweetheart to work with. And all I had to do was give him certain excerpts, and of course, I think he did a little video about how he came together with the idea, and of course, I went along and gave my thoughts and everything, and we came up with a script. And I think he's going to explain that in there, how he took that little script and the voiceovers that you hear in there as the first female voiceover is me, and I'm Emma. And then Eric was done by Ray Klein. He's a friend of mine. And Don, he is just genius with his work. So.
Oh, great. Well, let's take a minute to get some information from Don on exactly how they do these trailers. And we'll get right back to you.
Okay.
Okay, and our next guest is Don Reamer from Airworthy Productions, and he's going to give us a little inside scoop on the trailers that they're making for these books.
Hello, Denise. Hello, Fay. And hello to everyone at Fairy Tale Access. I am Don Reamer, and I'm the editor that helped Fay complete her book trailer. So let's get started in that story. First thing we had, of course, was a script. I do recommend a script for anyone attempting a book trailer. This is just a simple 2 pages, but it gives you a very important structure to follow so that you're not wasting time on things that may, in fact, not be needed. So Fay provided a passage of dramatic dialogue, which you see here, that is from the novel, and then that transitions into a fast-paced montage of stock clips with music, which is then intercut with these text bullets you see here that kind of are thematic to the story and establish sort of a spooky tone. After we agreed on the script, the next thing was to buy the stock footage, and we did that here at a wonderful website called pond5.com. Great place to buy stock footage, wonderful resource for filmmakers. And at that point, it was time to start editing, which we did in Final Cut Pro. First step for me was actually just sort of a rough proof of concept animation to make sure that I could do this push in on the mirror to my satisfaction and make the eyes appear the way we wanted to. And then I'm just going to jump right to the final version, which you see here. It took about half a dozen revisions, I would say, working back and forth with Fay to get to this point. You see all the audio elements on the bottom here. These are sound effects, music, and then dialogue right here. And these are the visual elements. Here you see the push in on the mirror, the relation of our demonic figure, and a shout out to Greg Palco, who created this figure, and also the much better frame for the mirror that we use in the final version. And here's our stock footage then, things that are thematic to Paris, and also just some kind of generally spooky images like these lightning flashes and so on. And then intercut with our sort of glowing, magical-looking text, which you see at the end here. And that's the final trailer, revealing the cover and little information for where the book can be purchased for readers at the end. And that was pretty much it. Fay, I am totally ready for the next one. Again, I'm Don Reamer, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
Well, Mr. Reamer had quite a bit of information. That was just amazing. And now that the book is published, and you went with a traditional publisher, correct?
Yes, I did.
Well, that's exciting that a publisher wanted the book, because so many people are self-publishing these days. So I think that gives it an extra special twist, because I'm not the only one that really loves it. And the more people that see it, they're going to be amazed.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say that because I worked really hard on that. Yes, I went with Rogue Phoenix Press. They're wonderful to work with. The editor is Christine Young, and she was very helpful. There were things that even I learned. I mean, you think you go through school and you learn English and you think you've got it all, but writing a book is a little bit different than learning just to speak the language and learning to write everyday language. There are some things that we don't think about, and Christine was very good at helping me with that. So yes, I went with traditional only because I find that if you have a targeted audience, say you've written something that's nonfiction, it's your philosophy or your take on something that you want out, and it's something where you're targeting just a certain group, then you might want to self-publish. I would still say be careful because there are a lot of self-publishing crooks out there, people just ready to get your money. I still think that a traditional publisher is the way to go, but then that's my opinion.
Oh, well, that's great. Now, it's published, people are reading it, they like it, and was accepted to be written into a screenplay. What's that process like?
Okay. Well, no, this one hasn't been done yet, but what happens is that you find someone that knows the formula and everything for screenwriting, somebody who's got some kind of credits, and then what they'll do is that they'll read your book, and they will then take it from there, because it's not always an adaptation. Where an adaptation, the difference is that when you adapt it, it's going to be pretty much like the book. There are some things that have to be changed because screenwriting is different from the actual novel. However, when somebody says it's a based on the story, then that means there's going to be a lot more changes.
Oh.
And that's what happens with a lot of the books. But I had Brandon Wyse. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a very talented screenwriter. And he did the adaptation for one that hasn't been published yet, where it's in the works though. It's called Midnight Fantasy. And then he's helping me with Shadowbender, which is the second book that's has just been released.
Oh, great. Is there going to be a sequel to the first book? Behind the Mirror?
Yes, I've already written it. Yes, I've already written it. I just have to edit it first and then present it to my
Oh, I
publisher.
can't wait. That's awesome.
Yes, I've got it entitled Eric's Journal.
Earth's Journal?
Eric's Journal.
Wow.
You know, Eric is the same character that's in there. And then this is his journal and how that's going to come to life and how that's going to bring about a new adventures, more magic and more excitement.
No pressure. Just hurry up. I can't wait to hear what happens next. And we're going to just take a second to introduce Brandon Wyse to find out a little bit more about the script writing process that goes along with the books. So right now you have Behind the Mirror, Midnight Fantasy, and Shadowbender, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and Brandon worked on Midnight Fantasy with you, right?
Yes, he did.
All right, well, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Mr. Brandon Wyse, who is a screenwriter and scriptwriter. Hey, Brandon.
Hey Denise from Fairy Tale Access. This is Brandon Wyse, the screenwriter for Fay Simon's book Midnight Fantasy. Just want to introduce myself to everybody on the show and say what a joy it was for working with Fay and bringing this story to a screenplay format where hopefully we'll have it made into a movie in the next few years that can excite audiences and bring the romantic comedy genre into a new level and a new phase. And so a little bit about the story. Basically, it's Desmond and Trish, and one of them lives in a fantasy realm in their head, fantasizes over the other, but what if those fantasies all of a sudden magically became reality? And how they deal with it and cope with them becoming their very fantasies, where the lines of reality and realism are skewed. And just want to say again, thank you for Fay giving me the opportunity to adapt this book into a screenplay, and I want to say thank you, Denise, for being on Fairy Tale Access, and have a good night.
Wow, there is a lot that goes into this whole process.
Yes, it is. It's not easy being a writer of any kind. People think that it isn't a job. It's really more of a job than your everyday corporate jobs. It's a lot to write the book. It's a lot to write the screenplay, trying to get someone to correlate and talk to you about it. It's really a process, but it's something that I love. I love being creative and sharing my thoughts and making other people happy.
Well, I can't wait to share the trailer with everybody. It'll really give them an exciting idea of what the book is about. So where can we get your books? Where are they available right now?
Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
They're also at Barnes & Noble online and Rogue Phoenix Press. That's roguephoenixpress.com. And if you are in any place that you have ebooks, Kobo, I can't think of all of them, but anywhere you can get an ebook, you can get my book there, Behind the Mirror. And also Shadowbender, because Shadowbender has also been released.
Oh, great.
And that is also same thing. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and RoguesPhoenixPress.com.
Oh, great. And do you have any advice that you'd give to young people that are seeking a career in writing? Do they need extra jobs?
Yeah, you still need to keep your day job, but I would suggest that you write. And when people say they don't have time, if you are a writer, you'll find the time to write. Because there were times when I had 2 jobs and I wrote Behind the Mirror. I would write as you took time to read up to 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm writing all night long. And I found that I was tired, but that adrenaline was really pumping, and I wanted to get my story down on paper. So sometimes I would take a paper and pad to work if I didn't have access to the laptop. Then I would write it out by hand. Yes, I wrote it out by hand. Came home, typed all night long, and then not only the typing, then there's the editing, your own personal editing. Then there's the editing from the editor. And then what this editor does is that before it becomes an ebook, you have one last look. Before it goes to print, you got one last look. So they edit it very well, let me tell you. But if that's what you do, if you want to write, no matter how old or how young, you find the time to write and keep writing. And then I would also suggest that you have somebody to read it, a friend, relative, somebody who can give you some good feedback. They don't have to be an editor, but just like you have maybe a relative or will say, okay, let me read that for you. And they can give you their feedback. You don't have to have a professional, just to see if they liked it, if there's something that they didn't understand. So get a lot of people to read it before you actually go to publish it. And then I would say, don't be discouraged. Don't let a rejection, even if somebody that reads it say, I don't like it. Nobody wants to hear, I don't like it. But if you ask for an honest opinion, rather than just accepting, well, I don't like it, ask them why. Maybe there's something you want to change. But I say write, write, write. Don't stop. Don't get discouraged.
All right, well, we hope that you continue to write. And I want to thank you so much for being here today and giving me such a fantastic book to read. I can't wait for the next one. And I can't wait to read this one again. And like your writing, I think the adrenaline that you pumped into it definitely comes through the reader, because my adrenaline was pumping the whole time reading it. So until next time, everybody, keep asking questions. And we're going to give you a sneak peek at Miss Simon's trailer, Behind the Mirror. It's great.
I will do everything I can to find out where she is and how to bring her back. I can promise nothing.
Emma, are you still here? Do you remember the time we went to the park and watched the play?
Yes, it was our first day together.
It was our first day together.
Eric, I'm right here in front of you. Can't you hear me?
If you can hear me, try to remember what happened.
It was the mirror. The mirror.
Emma, are you in there? Is this how I find you? Perhaps, in order to see you again, I must die.
No, that's not the way.